Alcohol was my thing, and there was no one who wanted to stop more than I did, and I just didn't know how. Welcome to There's Always a Way, a special limited series of Hope Comes to Visit. I'm Danielle Elliott Smith. 7 years ago today, I made one of the hardest and ultimately most life-changing decisions of my life. I chose to ask for help. At the time, I thought my story was just about alcohol. I couldn't have been more wrong. Over the past 7 years, I've come to realize that while alcohol may have been what brought me to the starting line, it was never the whole story. The real journey has been about reconnecting with myself, learning to trust myself again, healing, growing, finding hope, and building a life I no longer wanted to escape. That's why I created this series, to share and remind all of us there's always a way. Because after hundreds of conversations with people in recovery, men and women who are just starting to question their relationship with alcohol, experts, authors, physicians, advocates, and people who have walked their own unique paths, I know this to be true. There isn't only one right way to redefine your relationship with alcohol. Some people stop drinking completely. Some people choose moderation. Some are simply asking questions they've never said out loud before. Every journey is different, and every story is personal. And every path deserves compassion. Over the next several episodes, you'll hear from people whose experiences couldn't possibly look more different. Yet each one reminds us of that same beautiful truth. There's always a way. Whether you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, supporting someone you love, or simply curious about what life might look like on the other side of change, I hope you'll find yourself somewhere in these conversations. It's also incredibly meaningful that this episode and this series are all being released on two very important anniversaries that have changed my life. As I mentioned, today marks 7 years since I began my own sobriety journey. But it's also 1 year since I launched this podcast, Hope Comes to Visit. When I started the podcast, I simply thought I was creating a place to share stories of hope. I never imagined that 1 year later, it would also become the bridge that led me here to creating the ReDefining Sober app and to having these conversations with all of you. Looking back now, I can see that every step, every conversation, every lesson was preparing me for this very moment. Thank you for choosing to be here with me. I hope my story, or one of the remarkable stories in this series, gives you or someone you love the spark of hope they need at the very moment they need it. To kick off the series, I wanted to share my story, how I found myself here. I've interviewed hundreds of people over the course of my career. I've asked countless questions about love, inspiration, grief, resilience, healing, recovery, and hope. But today I wanted to answer the question I've been asked more often than any other. How did you get here? It's an interesting one because unlike many people who have had any type of sobriety journey, mine didn't start when I was very young. I was what one would call a normal drinker. And by that, I mean I never drank in high school. I was the sober driver. I drank like an average college student. I drank some and then I didn't. I partied, but when I graduated from college, I went out into the real world and I adopted all of the average drinker mantras. It's 5 o'clock somewhere to me was strictly a vacation mantra. I didn't really drink much during the week. I only had 2 glasses of wine. If I did drink when I was preparing dinner on a Monday or a Tuesday, but even that was a rarity. If I went out, I drank on a Friday or a Saturday. I didn't drink on Sundays because we were preparing for the week. And this was all until I did. I grew up in a home that included alcoholism, and I was positive because of that I would never be that. But also, I had a very rigid definition of alcoholism. Alcoholism to me was very specific. It was someone who drank every day. And then as I got older and moved out of the house, it was defined by what we see on TV, right? It was someone who was homeless. They were drinking out of a brown paper bag. They were drinking $2 vodka. And so to me, as long as I wasn't drinking every day, I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't have a problem. Somewhere in my early 40s, I started to find myself drinking through trauma. I would drink when I was stressed. I would drink when I was sad. I would drink when I was anxious. And it was very much someone pour me a glass of wine. When I was dealing with traumatic events, I was stressed, I deserved a glass of wine. To me, alcohol became a form of self-care. And I am here to tell you, alcohol is not self-care. Even today, if I was to hop on Facebook and I said, okay, guys, I am super, super stressed. What should I do? Someone would say, oh, sister, get yourself into the bubble bath, pour yourself a glass of wine and relax. Because we treat alcohol like it's fun, it's vacation. And honestly, it's everywhere, right? We go to PTO meetings, we have mommy meetups, we drink at kids' sporting events, we drink at sporting events in general, baseball games and football games and the World Cup, and we drink on vacation, and we drink at the end of a work week because we've had a hard week, and we drink because we got fired, and we drink because we're going to a funeral, and we're always drinking because. In my world, all of my becauses wound themselves into 3 and 4 glasses and sometimes more on a fairly regular basis. I found myself occasionally blacking out, but I thought blacking out was a Danielle problem. I did not know that blacking out was an alcohol problem. My family started to say, okay, Danielle, how come it's always 3 glasses of wine? And I replied, well, the last time I checked, I turned 21 a very long time ago. Why is anyone monitoring what I'm doing? But because I felt watched and monitored and therefore judged, I started to hide it. And because I was hiding what I was doing, I was drinking more. I was no longer really keeping track of how much I was drinking. I was just hiding it in different places. And the more I felt judged, the more I was hiding it. I was drinking before we went to dinner. I was pouring myself some wine while I was getting ready, but I wouldn't let anyone see it. If I was going out with girlfriends, I was drinking before I went, but I was very vigilant about what everyone else was drinking because suddenly I was worried that everyone was monitoring. Am I going past my normal too? So I would have one when everyone else had one, and I would order a second only when everyone else ordered a second. And if I was with a group that would have a third and a fourth, I would have a third and a fourth, but I became very vigilant about it. And because I wasn't drinking every day, but just binge drinking, I thought I didn't have a problem until one day I thought, why can't I stop drinking? And then I Googled, why can't I stop? And Google populated for me drinking. And I thought, it's the #1 search. And at that moment, I had the chance to recognize that because I was searching for something that was clearly being searched a lot, and therefore a question a lot of people had, and therefore very likely a problem, I had the opportunity to recognize that my system was saying, okay, Danielle, are we drinking a little bit too much? But I was unwilling to acknowledge that. So I did the mental gymnastics to say, okay, since everyone's searching for it, clearly it's not that big of a deal. And I relied upon all of the social messaging that was instead saying rosé all day, and the glasses and the mugs that were saying, shh, this isn't coffee. Because I wanted to instead be a part of the societal alcohol is fun. It's just, I'm just having a good time. I'm just part of the crowd. But I'm here to tell you, if ever you think to yourself, I wonder if I'm drinking too much, the answer is always yes. Now, the question is, do you want to do something about it? Because anytime we get that question in ourselves, The answer is always yes. Am I eating too many Oreos? Am I shopping too much? Am I spending too much money? Am I staying up too late? Am I doing something that my system is warning me about? The answer is always yes. The question is, what do you want to do about it? Danielle didn't want to do anything about it initially because Danielle did not want to be the girl who had to stop. And it took me back to a time that I was 38 years old and I was sitting with a friend who owned a yoga studio, and she was preparing to turn 40, and she had broken her entire year before she turned 40 into 6-week segments. Why? Because it's 6 weeks to create a habit. And she was creating new habits for herself along that journey into turning 40. And one of those 6-week segments, she had said to herself, I'm not going to drink. And when I said, why? She said, well, I think I've noticed that I'm getting a little too comfortable with drinking regularly. And honestly, I want to be in control of it. I don't want someone else to tell me you have to stop. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And mind you, this was at 38, right? This was long before I was noticing that I was regularly drinking, and or I thought, do I have a problem? So it hadn't even registered yet. But I do remember thinking at that point, A, I don't want to be someone who someone else tells me I have to stop drinking. B, I also don't want to try your 6-week challenge. Because again, I didn't want to be different from anyone else. I didn't want to be the girl who couldn't do mimosas and do a ladies who brunch, ladies who mimosa on a Sunday. But I reached a point where even when I said to myself, my problem is because everyone's monitoring me, that wasn't my problem. My problem was that I was unwilling to acknowledge that piece in me that wouldn't take ownership for, am I drinking too much? Am I willing to acknowledge that I'm not asking myself the correct questions? And I will always wonder, who would Danielle be today if Danielle had been willing to acknowledge the, am I drinking too much? And what questions should I be asking myself now, right? Because when I hit my 6-month sobriety, I wrote about it. And I said to friends, family, anyone who is listening, start asking yourself, am I treating alcohol like a form of self-care? Am I treating it as though I should be saying, do I deserve this? Did I earn it? Am I trying to mask how I feel? And people came back to me months later and said, Danielle, I started asking myself those questions, and now I'm drinking 2/3 less than I used to be. And that's when something went off in my brain. And I thought, we're going to redefine what sobriety looks like. At some point, this is what I'm going to do. Now, I fast forwarded a bit because my story, of course, didn't take that turn. My story took a turn that was far more challenging for me. I continued to drink. I continued to tell my family I was stopping. I continued to believe that if everybody just left me alone, I would stop. At the time, my husband and I were not getting along very well, and my drinking was making it worse. And he said, you know what? We've always talked about you going away for a month or so during the winter months to get away from the cold. Why don't you take this opportunity to do that? Go down and get a bungalow on the beach and start working on your next book. And I did. And I thought, you know what? This is my opportunity to prove to everybody. Once I'm left alone, I'm not going to drink nearly as much. And instead, I drank every day. And that solidified my need to drink every day because then my system needed it. And when I came back from being away and I promised my family that I wouldn't drink, I couldn't not drink. My system wouldn't allow it. No matter how many times I woke up at 3:00 in the morning and thought, I did it again. I don't remember going to bed. Who do I have to apologize to? 3 or 3:30 was always my witching hour. I would wake up and I would think, what did I do? What did I say? Who do I have to apologize to? Did I pay my bill? Oh gosh, I look at the receipts. I paid for everybody. I was a very generous drunk. But it was all wrong. the only way I could ever go back to sleep after those 3:00 witching hours was to say to myself, I promise I'm not going to do it again. I promise I'm not going to do it again. I promise I'm not going to do it again. And for me, it felt like an abject failure. I would wake up in the morning and I would say, okay, I'm doing it. Today's the day I'm not drinking. And I would make it through the first part of the morning, and I would get to 2 and 3:00 in the afternoon, and I would think, I can have just one. Because I wanted so desperately to prove to myself that I could control it. But it just wasn't possible for me. It escalated. My family continued to get upset. My kids continued to struggle with this person who wasn't behaving like the mom they knew. I went out of town with my now ex-husband, who many of you know is a good friend of mine, and who at the time was trying very hard to understand what is going on and why can't she stop drinking? Because if you have ever loved someone who won't stop, can't stop, you keep thinking, so just stop. Similar to how I would respond to someone who won't stop eating Oreos. I don't have a problem with eating Oreos. I would think, so don't eat Oreos. But it's not my thing. Alcohol was my thing. And there was no one who wanted to stop more than I did. And I just didn't know how. So on this particular day, I drank when I said that I wouldn't. I didn't remember. And I woke up in the morning and I tried to pretend like nothing had happened. And my then husband looked at me and said, no, kid, we're not doing this. I'm not even mad at you anymore. I am legitimately worried about the mother of my children. You are not okay. I have found a place for you to go that will treat you like you need to be treated. It will help you, mind, body, and soul. But if you're not willing to get the help, I can't have you around the kids. And that day, I felt like I gave up and gave in, but it was something I needed to do. I decided to get the help I needed. And that same day, I found a text between my kids that said, too bad mom loves wine more than she loves us. I am so incredibly grateful that I got that help, that I have stopped drinking, that I now have 7 years where my kids get to see that never did I ever love wine more than them. That was a sicker version of me. And this is the healthier, happier, present, free version that gets to show up for them every single day. But it's been a process. And what I have understood through that process, because that girl who didn't know what to do at one point was drinking warm, leftover wine out of a red Solo cup, slamming it in the bathroom just to get alcohol in her system, looking in the mirror and thinking, what have you become? And I recognized that I didn't want to live that way anymore. But that version of me needed compassion and connection and love. I'm not a tough love kind of girl. I'm not a get it or else kind of girl. And I recognized through my journey, because one of my obsessions in seeking recovery initially was how many times I heard stories of relapse. And there are some people who will tell you relapse is part of recovery. And for some people it is. For some people it isn't. It doesn't have to be. And that's the beauty of this, because there is no one right way, right? Some people decide early on, I need to change my relationship with alcohol, and they start to moderate. Some people recognize, this is my thing. Alcohol is no longer my friend. And that's where I ended up. I ended up in a place where I said, alcohol is no longer my friend. And I have to recognize that's not a version of me I can go back to, because I became if I have 2, I have 10 or 12 or 14 kind of girl. And when I get to 14, I no longer remember. And then I'm the girl who wakes up at 3:30 in the morning and thinks, oh God, what did I do? That's the version of me I don't want to go back to. That version of me woke up every morning and thought, okay, what do I have to get done today before I can drink? So I now have so much more time in my day. I have so much more freedom. And it took getting all of the alcohol out of my system to recognize that I was numbing how I felt, because I didn't want to deal with my emotions. I didn't want to deal with the trauma I'd been feeling. But in doing so, I was also numbing everything else, because we don't get to selectively numb. I don't get to only numb this feeling of sadness or this anger or this frustration or this disappointment or this deep pain. When I'm doing that, I'm also numbing sounds, and I'm numbing colors, and I'm numbing the taste of food, and I'm numbing joy. And unless I experience those deep, dark moments, I don't recognize what joy and amazement and inspiration really get to feel like. So when I numb, I'm numbing them all. And not numbing means I get to experience all of it, the highs and the lows. And I wish I could tell you that in this place of sobriety, that I don't ever have to experience hard things anymore. That is not the case. Life still hits me hard. I have still experienced tremendous grief. I have still experienced extreme disappointment and stress, and I do have triggers. But for me, the key to staying in this place has been figuring out what works for me. And that's part of that has been helping other people figure out what works for them. And redefining sober is part of that. One of the first things I did in my recovery was start working with other people, because I knew that I had been functioning at a high level in my alcohol struggles. I was able to say, I know there are other people who are like me. And if by talking about it, if by sharing about it, if by loudly saying, I am not drinking, and it's okay not to drink. It's okay to choose a sober world. It's okay to look at your relationship with alcohol and assess it and say, what would I like to change? From the day I walked out of treatment, I have said very loudly, I don't drink alcohol. And sometimes people clutch their pearls and say, oh my gosh, my grandfather told me never to trust someone who doesn't drink. And some people say, good for you. And some people say, ooh, there's got to be a story there. Why? I recognized early in this recovery journey that it wasn't that I was afraid to stop drinking. I was afraid of becoming the woman that I had to be, the woman that was deep inside me. And one of the things that I recognized was my thing, because I think everyone who decides to change their relationship with alcohol has to have a thing. And that thing might be a 12-step program. It might be meditation or helping other people or going to church and finding God. It might be going out with your friends or exercise. But, and you'll hear in one of our stories, my friend Adam says, it's finding your passion. For him, his passion is his family. I say it's finding your thing. My thing has been working very hard to help other people. Early in my recovery, that looked like every time I had a trigger, I would text other people and say, hey, how are you doing? Because it just meant the focus was off me. I want anyone who decides to change their relationship with alcohol to understand what community and connection and compassion look like. It's one of the reasons that I created the ReDefining Sober app. I think that the app is the support that I wish that I'd had. Initially, I was in the rooms of the 12-step program. And for a time it worked. And then it didn't. And I want people to know, if that's you, that's okay. Because everyone gets to find their way. So maybe you're curious. Maybe you're thinking about stopping drinking. Maybe you're already thriving without drinking. Maybe you don't know. And that's what inspired the app. I created ReDefining Sober because I believe changing your relationship with alcohol isn't just about drinking less. It's about living more. It's a personalized app that meets you wherever you are, whether you're questioning, changing, or already alcohol-free. After a simple onboarding experience, the app creates a path that's completely unique to you. There's daily guidance, coaching, meditations, videos, reflections, and practical tools that get to evolve as you do. My hope is that it helps you to reconnect with yourself, build self-trust, and create a life you truly love. Because there isn't one right way to redefine your relationship with alcohol. I know I keep saying it, but I really and truly know in my heart there's always a way. And it's not always just about alcohol. It's about permission. Permission to ask, permission to change, permission to redefine, permission to begin again. Before we go, I want to speak directly to anyone who's listening quietly today. Maybe you've never told anyone that you're questioning. Maybe you've been wondering if you're drinking more than you'd like to be. Maybe you've convinced yourself that things just aren't bad enough. Or maybe you've already stopped and you're just trying to figure out how to build a life that has more joy and less judgment from other people. And you want to feel more connected to yourself. I know all of those questions because I've asked all of them at some point in my journey. 7 years ago, I was terrified to admit that something needed to change. I thought just because I was asking the questions meant that I'd somehow failed. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Asking the question was just the beginning of finding myself again. And I created ReDefining Sober because it's the support I wish I had. I was first trying to figure all of this out, and I wasn't looking for a program or anything that was fixed or shame-based or judging. I didn't want labels. I just wanted compassionate guidance. And that's what ReDefining Sober is intended to be. Honest reflection, practical tools, a place that meets you exactly where you are. Whether you're simply curious, actively making a change, or maybe you've already been alcohol-free for a year. There is a place for you within the app. I believe with my whole heart, there isn't one way to redefine your relationship with alcohol. But friends, there's always a way. If you're ready to take the next step, I'd be honored to take those steps alongside you. You can learn more at redefiningsober.com, or you can head right to getting the app, and that's at studio.com/Danielle. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. So many of you trusting me with your stories. I am so grateful. If you find this story hopeful in any capacity, I hope you will share it. And there are 4 more stories that I would love for you to listen to in this special limited series of There's Always a Way. I can't wait to hear what you think. And until next time, take very good care of you. If you've been joining us on Hope Comes to Visit for a while, you've probably noticed that many of our conversations come back to the same themes: self-awareness, healing, growth, resilience, and finding our way back to ourselves. That's exactly why I created ReDefining Sober, initially as a coaching program for women who wanted to redefine their relationship with alcohol, and now I'm excited to share as an app. ReDefining Sober is a guided app for women who want to explore, question, or change their relationship with alcohol in a way that feels supportive, compassionate, and free from shame or rigid rules. Through personalized reflections, guided exercises, meditations, videos, and AI-powered support, the app meets you where you are and helps you build self-trust, reconnect with yourself, and create meaningful change. Whether you're sober curious, actively making changes, or already alcohol-free, you'll find tools, encouragement, and support designed just for you. To learn more, visit redefiningsober.com to get started.